Meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board of Trustees to order at 7 p.m. on July 26, 2018. For the record, all board members are present and we constitute a quorum and may conduct business on behalf of the district as required by Board Policy BBD Local. Let the minutes reflect that all board members have begun acquiring hours for the current reporting period ending May 4th, 2019. Our first item is the consent agenda. We stuck this on here because we figured out we had some work that needed to be done before school started. So we appreciate this. Should hopefully go pretty quickly. The consent agenda is a mechanism that the board uses to approve a number of routine items together with a single vote. In compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the public notice for this meeting includes the list of all consent agenda items, and the board has been provided ample information about these items in advance. Prior to any action taken on the consent agenda, board members may request withdrawal of individual items for clarification. Board members, are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda? Looks like we're good. So do we have anybody that would like to make a motion? Randy?
Supposed to take all of this. I would like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to make a second? John?
Second motion that we accept the consent.
All those in favor? Raise your hand. That is unanimous, Ms. Scribner. Let me figure out where we are. So our next item is non-action items. Report from Citizens Advisory Committee, presenter Mr. Doug Hrabacek. And we really want to thank everybody that has been participating in this process, and we look forward to hearing your advice and recommendations. Thank you.
Mr. Klein, trustees, good evening. My name is Doug Hrabacek, and I'm here tonight as chairman of the Citizens Facilities Advisory Committee. First time I'd like to refer you to law support notification.
As you can see, our committee is comprised of an impressive cross-section of the community, and we have spent the last 7 months engaged in assessing our facilities and preparing a recommendation for you tonight. We are not here to discuss education, curriculum, or teachers. The subject this evening is our facilities. The average age of one of our campuses is more than 30 years old, and it's important to understand that a significant amount of dollars needs to be allocated to the not fun stuff you find in older buildings, things like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements, as well as new roofs. We are not here to discuss how we got to this point. However, we are here to be honest about what we have seen and where we are, as well as present a plan to move forward. Trustees, I would now like to share with you a little bit about the process the committee has been through the last 7 months. As you can see on page 3 of our presentation, we had our first meeting in January at R.E. Good Elementary. At that meeting, then President Matthews tasked the committee with assessing the facilities and preparing a recommendation to the Board of Trustees for a possible ballot proposition in November of this year. We were presented the same demographic data that was previously presented to the board, and we elected our chairman. In February, we met at Sheffield Intermediate. Corrigan, the architecture firm you hired to perform the assessment, presented their findings. We also discussed how each high school feeder pattern would schedule tours of the campuses located in the respective feeder patterns. By March, committee members began touring the campuses and taking notes, with Corrigan's assessment in hand, to see and experience the condition of our facilities. I would estimate that each member of our committee has participated in a minimum of 12 tours. Our March committee meeting was held at Mary Grimes, and a member from each of the feeder patterns reported their findings to the whole committee. I think it's important to understand that in addition to the campus tours the committee completed, the members continue to experience many of our facilities through the normal course of the various roles in our community. In April, we met at Vivian Field. We heard the results of a phone survey executed by the district regarding a possible ballot proposition. Hilltop provided a financial overview of the school district, and Corrigan then presented the staff recommendations, which you should have. It is a one-page document with 3 columns that looks like We had a rather lengthy meeting that night, and just like you, the trustees probably have this evening, committee members had many questions around the staff recommended projects. In particular, the base assessment line item that was presented to the committee at $198 million. The questions were appropriate, on task, and required responses in order for the committee to develop our recommendation. In May, we met at the Educational Services Division Complex. We toured that facility and then went through the district-created Google Drive to show all the information and data available to the members of our committee. On July 2nd of this year, the committee met and prepared the recommendation we are presenting to you tonight. We were fortunate to have President Nancy Klein and Trustee Sally Derrick there to observe the process. The first action of that evening was a unanimous position that the committee would not support raising the tax rate. So let me be clear. The committee does not support raising the tax rate. Then the committee deliberated a list of projects and developed a recommendation before you tonight that begins on page 4 of your presentation. Let me provide some highlights of the recommendation. The committee recommended the base assessment line item, which is just over $159 million. This number is down from the original $198 million due to some other recommendations we will cover in a moment. I'm sure you are all aware, you all have many of the same questions we had about such a number when we were presented this particular item on April 30th. This is where a lot of the not fun stuff is, necessary mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvements, as well as things like new roofs. To summarize, the intent of this line item is to bring all the CFB campuses up to an assessment score of 85. The committee recommends safety and security improvements totaling just under $14 million. The committee included permanent walls and doors at our facilities under this line item. Trustees, at this point, I do need to ask a favor. If you have not toured a campus with my friend Rex Redden, I'm going to ask that you schedule some time with him and do so. In fact, I would suggest that you visit McCoy Elementary and Creekview High School if at all possible. It is a jarring, eye-opening experience that adds perspective to this particular line item. The committee recommends approximately $16.5 million in technology infrastructure that would impact each of our campuses. Moving to page 5. The committee recommends $10 million in fine arts improvements. This is a hybrid of 2 items, would include fine arts improvements at Blaylock, Bush, Long, and Polk middle schools. Fine arts improvements for Field and Perry are covered on page 6 of your presentation. This line item would also include auditorium improvements at Smith, Turner, and Creekview. It would not include Ranchview due to the recent campus-specific modifications. The committee recommends athletic improvements totaling $3.6 million for full-size tracks at Perry, Field, and Long middle schools, with $7 million for improvements at Standard Stadium and the Natatorium, including lighting at the north end of the stadium for the shot put, discus, and pole vault areas, new visitors seating on the east side, restroom upgrades, and locker room and pool upgrades at the Natatorium. The committee recommends $21.2 million for career and technical education upgrades at the high schools, excluding Ranchview. And on page 6, we recommend $9.6 million for kitchen renovation and equipment upgrades. This would not include Sheffield, Field, or Perry due to the next 3 line items. The committee recommends transitioning Sheffield campuses into one campus at just over $30 million. This item deducts $8.8 million from the originally presented $198 million base assessment I mentioned earlier. The committee recommends $36.8 million for a comprehensive renovation of Vivian Field Middle School. This item deducts $15.3 million from the originally presented $198 million and would include fine arts improvements and kitchen upgrades. And the committee recommends $39.2 million for comprehensive renovations at DeWitt Perry Middle School. This item deducts $14.7 million from the originally presented $198 million and would include fine arts improvements and kitchen upgrades. The final page of our presentation is a one-page summary of our recommendation with a subtotal of $347,458,198 in capital improvement projects. After we developed our recommendation, the committee voted unanimously on 2 additional positions. Number 1, the committee supports putting a proposition on the ballot of the November 2018 general election. And number 2, the committee supports putting just 1 proposition on the ballot. Trustees, we have provided links in our presentation that will take you to the Google Drive staff setup that could provide answers to many of your questions. In closing, I would ask each of you to once again refer to the roster of community members on page 2 of your presentation and take a moment to reflect on who they are and the roles they play in our community. Additionally, I know you recognize that we have several members with many years of experience with capital improvements programs and work these types of initiatives on a regular basis, many as recently as May of this year. We have many members with deep knowledge of local voters and winning elections. But most of all, you need to know we have a group of community members that have come together, worked through an interesting process, and are committed to making this happen. I would like to recognize the tremendous amount of volunteer hours the community members of this committee have put into this effort over the last 7 months. While I have a lengthy relationship with the school district as a student and a parent, this has been my first involvement with the school district in this capacity, and frankly, I did not know many of the committee members before January. The commitment and passion of the community members has been impressive. This has been interesting, but it has also been an honor. President Klein, you asked if we could sit down, present our recommendation, then have a conversation with the Board of Trustees about our facilities. So here we are, ready to have a discussion, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would ask, could you ask your committee to stand up so we can recognize them, please? Thank y'all so very much. We appreciate the care and compassion that everyone has shown by donating their time to this process. I think we're looking forward to learning what y'all learned, because other than Miss Derrick, some of us are a little more in the dark and feel like we would benefit from asking some questions of y'all. So, board members, do we have any questions? Ms. Herbachi.
Or that were identified as the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing items. Is that me? Okay. What of those items, what keeps you up at night on, that needs to be done, needs to be repaired, or from, they're nearing the end of their useful life? Who stays up the most at night about this? Okay.
So all of them are important, or they wouldn't actually be on the list. They were identified in the facility assessment that was done as critical at end-of-life components. It is, and I appreciate Mr. Hrabachik's mention that this is the messy part of the consideration. It's things you don't see, but it's things that are really critical to how our buildings operate, like rooftop units. We have thousands of rooftop units. Many of those rooftop units directly affect what happens in the classroom. Those kind of things keep me up at night because we want those to be working. And I look back here at the principals and I think how important that is to their work. And so those are the components. Now, so all those pieces that were on that base project were identified in the facility assessment, and that's how they kind of got to that line item. Did that answer your question?
It does. And I think I'm trying to, if we don't put something or don't raise the capital funds to do those kind of repairs and replaces, then those items would be taken out. We would have to pay for those out of our operations funds, correct?
Right, I mean, if we have HVAC go down, we have contingency funds set aside to take care of those major repairs. But, this is a comprehensive upgrade of systems that haven't been touched in many, many years. So.
Mr. Shackman?
Let me add my thanks. Let me add my thanks to all of you who gave so many hours. A couple of things come to mind. Is that better? There, hey, okay. As we talk about the potential of a bond of this size, can you talk a little bit about, because the materials that we've looked at had several different scenarios. And so can we address some of those scenarios so that we get a sense of the flow that's being considered, looked at, and the actual timing of the bonds and payments and all of that?
So initially, what we looked at was being very conservative, and so we factored in no growth in our property values to see what the impact would be. We looked at staggering this out over a 2019 issue, a 2021 issue, and a 2023 issue. We would, of course, like to accelerate that for many reasons, but for cost reasons it helps. But that's what we started with, just to build one scenario. We've shared these with Dr. Chapman, and of course we would want him to weigh in heavily on how these are structured when he has the opportunity to spend some time reviewing the data. But we did look at that model, and then we did one accelerated one where we're issued right after 2021. 1 year later, we did the next final issue in 2022. Those are the runs we've done so far to determine what it would look like over the course of this issue.
Got two duds here. So the advantage of the last sale in 2022 would be getting critical repairs sooner?
Correct.
Question for my friend Howard Fisher that was on the bond committee 15, 16, 17 years ago with me. Sage, wise one. 15 years ago, we went for a $300 million bond program. How comfortable are you with this number that we're recommending this time, that you're recommending?
I look at it this way, if I think about what
I'm comfortable. The key is, what do you tell the community? Why are we doing this? Back then, we had growth. We are not projecting growth. This is not a Frisco situation where we've got kids and we don't have schools. We've got kids, we have schools, but we have not kept up. Like I said, we don't have to get to how we got here or try and place blame. How we got here is we went 15 years without a bond issue, and you get air conditioning and plumbing and electrical and new IT requirements and plumbing that doesn't look very good, and all of it doesn't work very well, if at all, in some places. And you sit there and you say, well, okay, if you do a bond issue of $250 million now, let's say, or 220, or pick your number, are you really going to come back in 3 years or 5 years and do another $150 or $200 million bond issue? And so to my mind, the answer is, you go to the community and you say, these are the very types of repairs you do to your house. We've got houses that are 50 years old, so to speak. We have got to renovate them. We have got to upgrade them. We have got to get them in a structure that meets today's educational requirements and where this district is trying to go for the students and the programs that they are trying to implement. And some of our structures just don't fit that very well. We are not going to raise taxes. We have one of the lowest combined tax rates of any ISD in the Metroplex, and that's not going to change. But we've got to do some of this stuff. We haven't had a bond issue for 15 years. You know, we need to do this now. It's going to take 5 to 7 years probably. I don't know, staff can tell you to do all of this. But I just am not sure that the best way to do it is to divide it in half or 2/3 and 1/3, because I'm not sure where we'll be in 3 or 5 years. I don't know what the economy will be like in 3 or 5 years. You know, if you'd have gone back after the 2003 bond election in 2008 or 10 when the economy had tanked, there's no one probably sitting up there and I wouldn't have done it either. So you've got to kind of strike while the iron is hot. We have seen other school districts do larger bond issues, coming in at, I don't remember, 75, 80% approval rates. So my view is we have a good story to tell. We need to be able to tell it, and we can. And we need to, I sit there and I go, 350 million, that's a lot of money. But we have a story to tell, and I think we need to go ahead and, one of the things why we kept going, even though we have a new superintendent, and welcome, is our view that, we've put this off. And when you're sitting there and you've got $200 million, if we weren't renovating the 3 schools, $200 million kind of in base critical things, and it's going to take you years to do it. And we don't want to wait till next May, and we want to get going on it. And I understand, it's a lot to digest, but in a short time for you all. But that was at least kind of where I was at with this, and it's kind of like here's where we are at with what we really think this district needs to do, and let's put it out for the voters, and hopefully they'll agree with us. I think they will.
Plus, I would imagine that the longer you wait to do something, the more it's going to cost when you get around to doing it. Well, and interest rates are going up. We don't know what they'll be in 2 or 3 years, and that may not be a benefit for us either. Obviously, we're going to, what they'll be when we actually float the bond issues may not be as low as they're now. But again, you don't know where they're going to be, so, and we do know construction costs have been going up recently, so put it off another 3 or 5 years, and you are likely to have higher interest rates and higher construction costs.
I think that's for sure.
I have another question since I'm talking now. I'm curious on the athletic improvements, full-size tracks at the Perry Field in Long. I know Perry has that cute little Grand Prix track that was there when I was coaching over there. That was pretty nice. It was, we had track practice on it, but I don't know how we did it. But I'm curious as to, we're talking about a 400-meter track at all 3 of those schools. That's going to be interesting to see where it's going to fit. I'm just curious about that. And on the Standard Stadium, yes, I agree with all of that. The north end lighting and the new visitor seating and restroom upgrades. But the last one, select exterior refreshes. I'm hoping that part of that deal is the underneath the visitor side over there. That needs some serious work. So if that's part of it, then that tickles me.
That, and Doug can talk more, that certainly was when we went to Standard Stadium, that was the visitor side, the seating and the sports and the restrooms. As we put it, the people who are coming to a game and they're a visitor and that's what they come, and that's the first thing they see of our district. It's a pretty sore sight. Particularly as we go and we try to, bring in students and programs, if that's what you present. And part of this, and it's not a huge amount, is also trying to make the campuses when you first come up. When you have a marquee that says, hey, this is a CFBISD school. And you're trying to have a nice marquee there that makes you look at that and say, oh, that's a nice campus. And so that was one of the things that standards that we looked at.
There are thousands of people that go to that stadium every Thursday and Friday night for about 12 weeks. You're right.
And we do competition. We do band competitions and other.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on the stadium piece. The visitors side of Standard Stadium, first of all, is 60 years old. Second of all, it is the front door of our school district, and it is the guest room of our school district. So if you look at the district we just competed in, and you have Prosper, Lake Dallas, McKinney North, the Colony, I'm missing Little Elm, Lake Dallas. These are people that drive a very long distance to live where they live, and then drive a very long distance to go back to work. And their impression of every single one of our campuses is what they see on the visitor side of Standard Stadium. Having said that, we did get a staff recommendation on this, and the staff recommendation was to take $500,000 of taxpayer money and simply pull up the extruded aluminum that's there now and use the same framing that's there now and put down new aluminum extrusions that would fill up the gaps where the cell phones and old nacho trays and small children fall through. Well, it's not funny, is it, Coach? It's the truth, right? Yep. It's the truth. We actually, and it was me actually, that asked for a number for precast concrete similar to what you see on the home side of the stadium. And I'm going to try to explain this, and Howard's going to correct me, I know, but you have 42 rows of seating on the existing home side that holds approximately 7,000 seats. What we asked for was seating that, again, about 15-yard line to 15-yard line. Precast product to match what's on the other side, 15-yard line to 15-yard line, would be about 21 rows. So that would take the seating on the visitor side down 50% to about 3,500 seats. However, it would take the seating at the stadium down only 25% to approximately 10,500 seats. Are you with me? Coaches, when's the last time we had more than 5,000 people in that stadium? Have we ever sold it out?
Yes.
Do we need 14,000 seats right now? Do we need 14,000 seats? Would we be okay with 10,500 seats? Okay. So that's the point. So we asked for a number. We got a number back. It went from 3.75 million to 3.8 million. But I have to tell you, I've been doing these types of projects for a number of years now. I would have guessed well north of 6 million for that number. And when this construction market in North Texas and the volatility of concrete prices, I would jump all over 3.8 million. And I want to be clear on this. The committee never took, we didn't take an official position on this, but it is very clear, and they can speak for themselves. We do not support the staff recommendation. We would not support taking $500,000 of taxpayer dollars, and I mean, that's not even lipstick on a pig. That's several levels below that. But we need to get some visitor seating that's acceptable. I'm very pleased with the 3.8 number. That's a board decision, and we're clear on that. But I think you have to have a little vision about what that would be when we're all done, and I think it's something we'd all be very proud of. And what this is not, that you need to realize, this is not a $60 million football stadium. It's $3.8 million. I think that's a responsible spend of taxpayers' dollars. And something else that I've learned, and I've received several phone calls from parents throughout the districts, and somehow the band parents got a hold of my phone number. But to say that the Standard Stadium is an athletics facility is not correct. It is a fine arts facility as well. It is a fine arts facility as well.
I would ask the mayors, how comfortable are you with, or just tell me what you saw or what you learned from the process.
Guess when you come in last, you're first up. It was eye-opening. You know, of course, I spend a lot of time at a lot of the campuses, at least in Farmers Branch. Go to games. You know, I've been around. Actually, was probably one of the closest people on a council to being in these schools, and knowing the history and where we're at and where both, at least Carrollton and Farmers Branch, are going. In the other 4 communities that kind of feed CFBISD, you know, I would have full confidence that you have my word that I'm going to push for this 350. I know there was some conversation that went, do we go higher? You know, do we push for a little bit more? Do we redo some of these schools? But when the consensus of the group is, you know, this is the main things that we want to focus on, that we want to change, that we want our schools, you know, when people are driving by looking at our areas, that are seeing regrowth, redevelopment, and kind of revitalization. You know, one of the first things they're going to look at is our schools. And having not seen a lot of upgrades in many years, you know, having the opportunity to see this is what we're looking for. We think it's going to help not only with the district, it's going to help with the perception, it's going to help with us and the marketing and everything that we want to do to tell the story that is CFBISD and how great these schools are. And I know that message, you know, I shout that from the rooftops. I think our council will be supportive of this, especially some of the upgrades that are happening in the schools, especially in Farmers Branch. And I know, given the last kind of issue that went out, our city might not have been the most supportive, but I don't think that you had anyone on the council, anyone that was directly out there championing why we're doing these things, why these matter, and why they matter across the board. And so I will support it. You know, I will talk to anyone, anytime about why we're doing this. This is why it was important for me to be on this committee, so that we had someone on the inside understanding the issues, hearing the opinions, and what the committee and the community wanted to say, we are going to carry this forward and keep moving CFB forward. And I think that's something that is going to benefit our community greater than any of the development that we have going on. Is how can we keep improving these schools and providing the fantastic opportunities that are available to these kids, so that more people are coming in and filling our schools. And this is step one of all the progress that's been made to date. So pass this off to Kevin. I'm the only one who can call you that, right?
Thank you.
That's right. Thanks, Mayor. I agree. As far as, you know, we just finished our $100 million bond election a few months ago. And I think the biggest thing when you're talking to voters is the no tax rate increase, right? The $350 million is a lot of money. I mean, that's a big number that a lot of people will probably focus on, but I think that the message is we're not raising the tax rate. And there's a lot of ways that obviously Tanya knows about how we ensure that doesn't happen by when you know, things are, first of all, I think it was extremely conservative, the projections, but if the bottom fell out, you're not obligated to issue some of those bonds. You can hold those things. There's a lot of ways to do that. So it's not like there's some commitment that if things really go haywire that you have to raise tax rates. I think you can monitor that as it goes. The other piece is that, you know, when we were dealing with it, you get some of the questions about, well, we're, you know, spending all our money paying for debt service. And when you look at it in today's environment, construction inflation is far outpacing the cost of debt. So quite frankly, when you do the math, you actually pay more if you want to, like, save your money and wait 10 years and then build it. You'll pay more over the course of that time, because construction inflation will have outpaced the cost of the debt that you'll take. So I think when I've told people that, they start to get it, that, hey, this is reasonable. I would recommend that you may not want to wait 15 years before you think about this again. Having toured a lot of the facilities, and this isn't meant to be an indictment on anybody, but these facilities need a lot of repair and maintenance that should just be happening as you go. A lot of these things shouldn't be waiting for that time period. And so I think that's something you also want to take a look at. But from as a mayor, the schools are obviously the single biggest thing that affects, I think, the community from an aspect of one organization or one entity. And so it's extremely important. And of course, I'm an architect too, so I'm extremely biased about buildings. But there's absolutely no question in my mind that the quality of buildings and the face of the buildings affects everyone's perception of not just the school district, which obviously it does, but also the community. And so we've taken a huge focus in Carrollton. I know that Farmers Branch has done the same thing on our corridors and beautification and doing things, because we live in a metroplex where that is not an option anymore, that we have to look good and we have to have a quality community, and so you have to invest to do that. So I think that's an important thing. The other piece is, and once again speaking as an architect, is that I am absolutely convinced that quality buildings and quality environment improves your education. There's proof of that, and I will tell you that sitting in some of those classrooms that I had to sit in where there's a flickering light or something, there's no way I could see a teacher having a good educational experience with their kids. And the environment is an incredibly important part of the educational experience, and that has to be put forward, and we just have to do that if we're going to have a quality education, which we do, and we need to continue. So I would encourage, really looking at, we've done some, I've got to get this in, the lighting test. I'm a huge, you can affect how those kids are learning by having the proper lighting. Yes, Nancy's looking at this And
I couldn't tell by looking over your head, so I had.
yeah, so crummy fluorescent lighting is not good environment for kids to learn. And so I promise you, you spend some of that money on these buildings, the educational quality will increase. And so that's what I tell my community if they start saying, why are we spending $350 million? I say, because we care about our kids. And I'm not going to raise your taxes to do it. And so I'm not worried about $350 million. Our bonds pass at a high percentage. You're going to have to deal with a lot of social media chatter, which is a very small minority. But you get this group here, and you guys talking about this in the positive manner that I know they can. This is a very doable thing. I'm convinced of that. But thank you, by the way, for the opportunity to
Thank
serve
you,
on
Mayor.
this.
And your talent as an architect is very worthwhile and helpful in this venture. Board members? Ms. Derrick, do you have any questions?
I want to thank the committee. I had the unique opportunity to serve with all of you prior to being sworn into office. So I started serving with you in January, and so I can speak to the tireless effort of this entire committee, the commitment from across the community. I'm so impressed by the just vast experience that we pulled to the table to do what's right for kids. And that's exciting to me, and that also speaks to that it was a unanimous decision by this committee that this is well needed, and I can speak to that as well, touring a lot of those campuses. So thank you for all of your time and effort you put into this and the heart. Our children deserve it, and they have you to thank. So I really appreciate that.
Is it working or no? I guess it is. I just have a question and then a couple comments after that. And I'm fairly new to bond, so I have a question with regards to the minimum assessment score of 85. How did you arrive at that number? And if you looked at a higher number, did you ever look into see how much more the bond would increase by, like say up to 90?
And be able to answer that for us?
Yes,
And we have
that number
microphone.
actually came from the facility assessment, so.
So, Guillermo, could you pass it to?
Sure.
This is Steve Halsey. He's with Corgan and facilitated and performed the facility assessment.
Sure. Well, what we did with the whole assessment piece and doing all the scores and the ratings for each one of the campuses was comparing them against each other, basically, across the district. A 100 score is a brand-new facility. So the only way to achieve that 100 score across the district is to build a brand-new school. So we brought the renovations up to an 85, which at 85 is an average score of taking all of the different pieces and components across a facility to bring it up to the top level of that without taking it all the way to say, let's tear them all down and make them all brand new schools, if that makes sense.
Guillermo, a similar thing occurs with roads. Cities typically evaluate roads like every 4 years, and then they have a goal for a road score for the city. Now, some cities may be tackling it by impacting drivers, but it's something you can either ignore or try to fix, but we're able to do our improvements without impeding people's commute to work.
And then for the second part, what I was saying, comments, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of you for participating in this. I mean, I know this is, no one's paying you to do this, and I really appreciate you doing this, taking the time, the effort to go out and look at the facilities and tell us what you think needs to be done. I agree with Doug. I think that the stadium is an icon for people coming into our community. What they see, that's what they first see. That's their first impression. That's what they're going to take back. And my mother a long time taught me, you take the bull by the horns. And so I think you have my support, and I'd like to move forward with it in November. I don't see that there's any need to wait. And I know that that's probably going to put a lot of work on Tanya, and I'm sorry. And everybody else back here in the administration. But you have my full support on it. I think this is something that's needed. At the end of the day, we waited too long, 15 years from the last bond. We've made that stretch.
Where were you 15 years ago?
I wasn't here. But we've made that money stretch, and that's a double-edged sword at the end of the day, because it's a way we can sell it to the community that, you know, we haven't been wasteful with the money. But at the same time, if we would have passed the bond earlier, we probably wouldn't need it to be this high. But I think it's something that needs to be done. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're taking care of our facilities. These are where our kids go to school, and we need to do this.
Taking care of our facilities and therefore taking care of our kids. And our staff, exactly. I'm good, I don't need.
I was going to ask Chief Redden to give us a little of his perspective, since we probably won't be touring schools with you.
Well, thank you. And it was interesting going around to the campuses and looking at them. I've been in town since 2010, been around to some of the campuses, been in a few of them, but many of them I have not had the opportunity to see. And you know, one of the things that kind of stood out from the safety and security perspective, of course, we all bring our different perspectives to the panel. That's what kind of made it work. But mine from the safety security perspective, and a lot of these buildings were built long before we had school shootings and things like that, before we ever had school, even had officers in school. So society has changed, and so we've got to make a few adaptations there. One of the things that kind of we really noted at many of the schools was the technical, the computer system, the hardware that runs the computer systems in there. Many of them were in closets that were open the door, and it's kind of like opening the door to the oven, you know, the heat coming out of the rooms. And so that's critical then to the security aspect of the school, because many of the security components are run by the electronics in there. So they kind of, one thing kind of fed to the other, even with some of the doorways and the way some of the classrooms were set up, and, you know, the open concept classrooms apparently. Yeah, from the 70s, and those, you know, where they've got temporary walls up. And so it's what's critical for those teachers when they, you know, when some type of a threat is presented inside of the school, and one their first move is to possibly try to leave, but then also to secure in place. And if you don't have a permanent door or permanent walls, it's very challenging. So this would be setting them up by building some of those permanent walls and doors, setting them up so that they'll feel more comfortable and safe inside the school.
Thank you. Board members? Terry, you got anything? I was going to say we have some homework to do between now and our next meeting. Staff has provided the board with the facility assessment on a stick. Yeah, I'll hand it back to you in a second. And then we've got a large notebook of all of the printouts of the information y'all received so that we can catch up. So y'all may be getting questions from us. You want to pass this to Doug?
Howard Fisher touched on this, and Mayor Falconer as well, but I want to make sure the board was clear on this. One of the things we talked about early on, and we've been working on in the city of Carrollton for many years without much success, is most of the schools in Carrollton, at least, do not meet the minimum landscape requirements for the city of Carrollton. No, it's not a very high standard. It's like a shrub, one shrub. They don't meet, you know, we looked into this. Dallas is a little different, a little more stringent. They did when they were built, they don't now. Irving, they did when they were built, they don't now. Farmers Branch actually does not have landscape standards for their schools, which is, that's fine. But if you were, if you were to drive across Keller Springs and take a look at B. Salazar, that looks like a federal institution for not good people. and it has a marquee out front that says CFBISD. It does. I think we forget, and we have tried to communicate this for years now. That is also a very highly traveled thoroughfare in the city of Carrollton. And people go across that road with realtors looking for houses and places to live. And when they see that facility and that it's a CFB facility, they don't want to look at the school. They have no interest in going inside of the school. But it's important to understand with this initiative that all of our schools would meet all the landscape requirements for the respective cities. And that sounds like a small thing, but that's a really, really big thing. It really is. The second thing I want to mention was the 85. I think Mr. Holsey explained that well. I think that's a good number, and I think that's a terrific message we can take out to the voters. We're not shooting for 100 here. We're shooting for 85. We're not asking everything to be brand new. We're shooting for an 85, and I think that's an acceptable score for the kids in our community. So I just want to make sure the board was clear on that. Thank you very much.
So what are the next steps in the process?
What are the next steps in the process? I mean, how does it work? What are our timelines? What do we need to do? What does staff need to do?
We would, once we have board direction, we would begin working with our bond counsel and attorneys. We would have to get a bond order ready. The board would have to adopt that bond order by August 20th. That's the latest date that the board can actually call the election. There's many requirements in the bond order. We would be looking at working with both Dallas and Denton County elections, so we would need to get with them immediately to start working on election contracts. But the first step would really be to start working on the bond order and getting that ready for potential board action by August 20th.
So is this something that requires action tonight or to direct staff to move forward with having those conversations? Sorry. I have one.
We're going to recognize all the staff that have participated in the process. Would y'all please stand? And those that didn't participate but are here tonight listening, would you stand if you think we need a bond program? I would let y'all ask questions, but I think our committee might be good. Y'all are welcome to corner them after we're done. But is there anyone on the committee that wants to say anything? I called on the people I felt I could comfortably call on and they would not be mad. Y'all are good? Bashful? I see you ducking over there. So I think that at this point, we're through with our non-action item, and in a few minutes, we'll be back on the action item. We have an item in between to discuss item 4A, items removed from consent agenda. There were none. Item 4B, consider approval of Amendment 1 to Balfour Beatty to perform construction services for building improvements at the 9 signature program campuses for a guaranteed maximum price action. So, Mr. Finley?
Let me get this started. President Klein.
Interesting to y'all.
We have many of the 9 campus principals here tonight, so they'll find interest. So Ms. Klein, Dr. Chapman.
And I understand it's short. No, I'm kidding.
It is short. I appreciate that comment. But we do appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you a very brief review of the small campus projects that we initiated for the 9 signature programs. Just a quick reminder to the board and to the audience and information to our new superintendent these projects were actually designed originally to be small. And the reason for that was we wanted to get them completed in a short time frame to be ready for the start of school in fall. So we had an RFP on the street early, which received absolutely 0 responses. And I remember I reported that to the board. And with that, we had to kind of go back to the drawing board and determine exactly how we're going to approach this project. At the same time, we did have a couple other projects out for RFP. One of them was our multipurpose knock building, which we did get responses on, and we recommended and the board approved Balfour Beatty for that project. We negotiated this small component as part of that project.
And I think your non-response was partially due to wanting it done over the summer.
No, exactly
And the
right.
capacity to perform that level of effort in that short.
Yeah, we actually got feedback from the construction industry, and that's exactly right. There was the timing of it, the size of the projects, the kind of strange nature of the projects, all created a lack of interest. So we negotiated with Balfour Beatty to include these projects in their larger project. It did push a time frame back, unfortunately, but we come to you now, tonight, with a recommendation following this brief review of the projects to continue and to get these projects going. So we'll start with Blair Elementary, and I'll use this as a template for the rest of the presentation. And I won't spend much time reading the presentation, but the way this worked is we met with each of the 9 campus principals in collaboration with the Educational Service Department, the Fine Arts, and the Science specifically. And we looked at each campus, and we allocated spaces in the campus that could be used for whatever that signature program needed. You're looking at a Fine Arts Academy at Blair, and so you'll see the shaded rooms that were designated for either dance, theater, or remember the last one? Music. Thank you. Sorry. And then I would like you to note the summer work by CFBISD. That's an important component of these projects. In order to mitigate this delay in scheduling, we took on some of the projects in-house, and you can see how those are listed. And typically it took the form of demolitions, so we wanted to get all the dirty work out of the way before the kids got back in school. So those pieces of projects are ongoing. Also draw attention to the guaranteed maximum price or the GMP there for each project. So this is Blair. The next project is
The marquee look like.
We'll show you a picture. This is Country Place again. You can note the spaces that we've allocated, and some of the spaces required the demolition of walls and some did not. The demolition is noted in a dotted line. This would be,
The banner be coming too?
so I'll talk a little bit about the banner.
Because oftentimes cities have rules about banners and they may not apply to schools, but.
No, they do. Well, I'm not, they do. So this is Kent. I will note that Kent is actually one of our elementary schools that did not have a safety and security vestibule, so that is actually included in this portion of the project. We felt that was critical to the campus, and that's noted in red. This is Landry Elementary. And on this one, this is another one of our large construction projects that is currently being designed, and the working drawings are being completed. So this will be the first phase of a much larger project, and that will come to you later in the fall. So now we move to the Spark STEM Academies. So the colors changed, the yellow being the maker spaces, and our thought was that is to designate spaces throughout the campus so kids in those clusters wouldn't have to travel as far. So that's why you see a number of maker spaces divided throughout the campus, and then each Spark STEM Academy also includes a STEM space dedicated specifically for group work in the STEM curriculum. This is Freeman, and I didn't note, but Ms. Klein did notice that the dots actually are important. The red dot is the approximate location of a new electronic marquee, and the blue dot is the approximate location of the banner. Strickland, as was the case with Landry, is the first phase of a much larger project. So there's, and this is actually the least expensive of the guaranteed maximum prices presented, and that is due in large part to the big project that's coming up. This would be rainwater. We're grabbing those collaborative spaces in those classroom clusters for that, which is really exciting because all 4 classrooms have they can directly use that campus. Again, this is one of those campuses that did not have a safety and security vestibule. You see that marked in red also.
The yellow diamonds, those are maker spaces?
So those are existing spaces, and those will be the small makerspace pieces. And so they'll have flexible furnishing in there, as will the STEM space. So that's part of the project that we kind of pulled out, so we're getting that ordered. That will come as an agenda item in the next board meeting. Then River Chase Elementary, you can again see the spaces that are existing. We're designating it as those.
But does it make sense to have the banner right beside the marquee?
Again, these are approximate locations, and so Ms. Klein, and I'll speak to that in a little more detail in just a sec, because it's actually a very good question. So here's our banners. To answer Ms. Klein's original question, there are sign ordinances that have a square footage limitation. In our case, it's 100 square feet. So the banners that we're looking at purchasing are 8 by 12, 96 square feet. They're not large when you put it on a big building, so we want to be very intentional on where those banners go. And so part of it will be and you can go by Blair. There's actually one up at Blair right now, and you can see it placed on a very large wall. Looks kind of out of place, and so we're going to be looking very closely on where those banners. What we want to do, and the purpose of this is to introduce the public that something great and new is happening at the campuses. This is one way to do it. And then we'll look and work with the communication team and look at some other means as we move forward to announce these programs as they continue to grow and expand.
Less than 100 square feet you can leave up for a long time?
Yes, ma'am. When you move inside, we have interior graphics designated as part of all these projects. You're actually looking at a STEM interior graphic and how that would work on the interior wall. We'll have graphics on the fine arts also. And this is our new marquee signs. Let me explain a little bit about that. The word welcome is the electronic component of it. It is in a precast concrete panel, and then the darker piece is actually a cutout metal piece that has the names. We're very excited about this component, as are the principals, on getting these new marquees at their campuses. Again, there's a lot of requirements and size of these that we had to abide by. Yes, ma'am.
On the marquees, was it a decision not to include CFB logo on the marquees? I mean, I feel like that's what people first see when they're approaching a school, and I want people to know that's a CFB school. I mean, I love these names. I love the names, but it's CFB.
So there will be another component coming, which will actually be a sign on the school itself that will have the CFB logo. So this was vetted with a number of people, part of the design team, and so we understand that CFB needs to be somewhere very visible at our schools. The issue is we were running out of real estate, honestly, on a sign because of the determined size of the sign, and so we felt like as a team that this was the best solution for the design. Any other questions?
Do you have anything else?
I think that may be it. That is it.
That's an interesting presentation. Board members, any questions other than what we've already heard? So when do you anticipate these will be done? Just wondering.
Sure. The substantial completion date listed on the amendment is in December, but we will be working very closely. And I mentioned this to actually one of the fine arts signature program teachers, which is excited about her new space, at dinner. And what we'll do now, if approved, we'll work very closely with the CMAR to start determining a really specific and detailed schedule for how this will work while school's going on. So there'll be components that will be happening much quicker. Some of this is just long lead items. For instance, the marquee takes a while to get those components ordered. So we'll do whatever we can to make sure that schedule is as tight as we can make it. And that'll be working with the CMAR.
So I don't see any more questions with that. Board members, we have a recommendation from the superintendent that the board approve Amendment 1 to Balfour Beatty, and it's on your agenda. Anybody interested?
And Ms. Klein, if I could just note, that is for a total cost of $1.3124346 million for all 9 campuses.
So the motion should include that amount?
Yes, ma'am.
So that amount is
$1,312,346.
And by this action, we're approving the funding, the contract, not what's included in here. I don't like the marquee. I want CFB on that marquee. So I don't want, I have no problem authorizing this contract, but if that's what I'm approving, I want CFB on the marquee.
I'd like to second the thoughts that Tara has about the marquee. I think that branding is everything, and in a competition world for school districts, we have to have our school district name on the marquee. I think that's elementary, easy.
I would like to third that remark.
Well, it appears we're getting consensus from the board. I believe we have opportunities with the funding to go back and look at the design specifically, but what we cannot look at is change the size of the sign.
That's a city rule, right?
That would require a ordinance, and it would, in all the cities, by the way. And so there'd be a couple of
Not
things.
picking on anybody.
That there's been nothing released to be purchased, so we have some flexibility in the exact design, obviously. We don't have flexibility in the size, so that duly noted.
So we have a recommendation written here on our agenda for a motion.
I move that we approve Amendment Number 1 to Balfour Beatty to perform construction services for building improvements at the 9 Signature program. Am I reading the right thing?
Yes.
For B. Okay, program campuses for a guaranteed maximum price of $1,312,346,000.
I will second that.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, board. That takes, and thank you, Mr. Finley. That takes us to item 4C, response to Citizen Advisory Committee report, staff investigation and recommendation action. Following the report of the Citizen Advisory Committee, board members have the opportunity to discuss any possible next steps or response, including any directives to be given district administration for future investigation or recommendation requests. Board, any comments, questions, or action?
So are we going to discuss the various bond options tonight as well?
Yes, we can do that.
Is there a possibility of discussing some of the advantages of going with growth or no growth, having a sooner last sale?
Are you talking about the tax, property tax values?
We went with the no growth model when we started projecting because we don't want to put information out that there's no tax increase with and project some value growth that end up not happening. And then we ultimately could have to raise the tax rate, although we could adjust the sales. We just wanted to be very conservative. And so by no growth, we're assuming that our property value is not going to change from today. There's also the possibility that it may drop over this 20-year period. So we want to leave the ability for that to happen as well. And us still be able to be under the number that we put out to the public, that we're going to stay under a certain tax number. So we just were very conservative with what we utilized with Hilltop. And that can be changed as we begin working towards the communication. We can adjust that. This was just an initial model to give the community members an idea of what it would look like. We'll be tightening those numbers up as we move forward.
Assuming growth, we probably wouldn't want to assume any greater bond value. It
Right.
would just allow a sooner payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Valenzuela,
Correct.
did that answer your question?
And it is significant. to
Microphone.
point out that staff has worked very hard, and the board has jumped on their recommendations at least 3 times in my tenure on the board of 5 years, that we have refinanced bonds, saved money, and we worked very hard to make all that happen. So it's not like it's one and done and we just go out there and live with it. Our staff works very effectively in that regard. One final comment I would make is that as we move in this direction, and I think there is positive thought process from the board and certainly from those of you that have served on the committee, I think it's essential that from day forward, this is a district process. This is not the new superintendent brought in to bring a bond. This is not something else. This is something we're all owning, that we've been working on as a board, as staff, together for a good 2+ years in various ways, and this is the timing that is right. And so I would encourage us all to have that kind of thought process as we move forward.
The timing is right. It might be almost late, but board members, any other comments? Is there a recommendation?
Is this a formal action or just a recommendation? Item. All right, well, then I move that the board directs staff to move forward with discussions on potential November bond ballot pre-plan. That really was a mess. Did the point get across? Okay.
And so basically what we would do is on August 16th, we would have all of that information available to the board, that in the event that you say, yes, let's go ahead and move forward with that November election, it's ready to go. We have to follow by August 20th.
Okay, so I'm going to add that date in there, that information will be brought back to the board for that August 16th board meeting for action then as well.
I second that statement in its entirety.
Mess.
All those in favor? Dr. Chapman, welcome to CFB. I'd like to come up with a new motto, CFB proud. The PTA had a wonderful one all last year, but I feel very proud to be a part of CFB. With that, it looks like we've come to the tail end of our agenda. We're going to see if Dr. Chapman thinks I'm funny or not when we're done, but he's irritated. But we're at item number 5, adjourn, and with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:08. Thank y'all so much. Stand around, visit,